Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for a webinar on how to overcome IAM challenges in hybrid and multi-cloud environments with Cybersecurity CEO Darren Guccione. We will just go ahead and start if you're all settled in. Darren, I'll let you take over.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Naz, and thank you to everyone who's attending today. A copy of this will be available, so if anyone needs a copy, feel free to reach out to us at pr@keepersecurity.com. Today I'm going to talk about how to overcome IAM challenges in hybrid and multi-cloud environments through IAM. We're talking about identity and access management. So here are the first 4 points that I'll cover. Actually, there's 5, and I'm going to recap with some Q&A, but we'll start off and talk about hybrid and multi-cloud landscape in the remote work era. That's the environment that all of us have migrated to today. The current cloud threat landscape, a little bit about COVID-19 threat vectors, and then I'll move on with IAM challenges when migrating to hybrid and multi-cloud environments, as well as ultimately how to overcome the challenges in the environment today dealing with hybrid and multi-cloud environments. So to kick things off, I'd like to talk about just the massive migration that we've all been going through with respect to the impact of COVID-19, where we've had to migrate on a rapid basis to distributed remote work environments. Now, if we get into just some of the specifics, we do a lot of work around just indexing and getting information, really concrete, objective data on the industry and what's happening throughout different segments, both domestically and internationally. And this first data point is really important. So, 75% of all organizations will have deployed a multi-cloud or hybrid cloud environment in 2020, according to Gartner. And we're seeing this more extensively through the deployments that we're actually engaging in as a company. And the IDC expects, by 2021, that will be the year of multi-cloud, as COVID-19 again reaffirms the critical need for the agility of all businesses as we migrate to on-prem to off-prem, more cloud-based environments, both utilizing hybrid cloud, which means, the on-premise cloud architecture, as well as the public cloud infrastructure that we are utilizing today. If you talk about hybrid cloud, a lot of people ask me, like, well, what is it? Well, generally speaking, this is the straightforward definition where you have a computing environment that combines both a public cloud architecture and a private cloud by allowing data and applications to be shared between them. And the reason we do this is for redundancy and for scalability. The hybrid cloud will allow companies to scale their resources around computing while also eliminating the need to make massive capital expenditures to handle short-term spikes in demand. So as you're scaling a business or an operation, having on-demand scalable resources both up and down your architecture is really important, and hybrid cloud really allows you to do that. So if you talk about a private cloud that you'll host internally through like a VPC or a hypervisor architecture, and couple that with a private cloud architecture through, for example, AWS or Azure or any of the other cloud service providers, you get really good optimization there. When we talk about a multi-cloud architecture, this is when you use multiple cloud computing and storage services in a single architecture, mainly around redundancy. So you can utilize 2 or more public clouds as well as a private cloud in this multi-cloud environment. And so what you want to do there is you'll eliminate any type of singular or unified reliance on a particular cloud provider or instance. This gives you operating redundancy in the event of an outage at one location or at one instance, and you'll have a failover instantly without any of the operations or your user base having an adverse impact. So by the year of 2022, we expect that over 90% of all enterprises worldwide will be relying on a mix of on-prem and dedicated private clouds. They will also utilize multiple public clouds as well as legacy platforms. So you'll get this hybrid environment. And it's really important to talk about this because the applications, especially in cybersecurity, that are being developed today must adhere and conform with any type of architecture in a customer environment. And this could be cloud, could be on-prem, could be hybrid cloud, could be a function or a combination thereof. So it's really important. But the main driver here is that more and more companies across the entire frequency spectrum, whether you're a small business or even a SOHO, medium-sized, larger enterprise, a federal or state or local government agency, higher ed or non-for-profit, doesn't really matter what sector you're in or how large or small. We are seeing a massive migration to enterprise cloud. So here's what the current threat landscape looks like today. So we have seen an over 600% increase in the number of cyber threats focused on cloud environments. And we'll get into the reasons, but generally speaking, it's a result of what's happening with the pandemic and post-pandemic as companies migrate to remote work environments with a far greater number of endpoints than ever before. We've seen an 80%. Basically, this statistic shows what's leveraged across COVID-19 as a theme in their attacks. So if you look at the cybercrime that's happening today, more than 80% of the populace, when you look at all of the cyber criminals out there, they're using this as a focal point to leverage their attacks. So when we talk about what's happening, we are all trying to accommodate the sudden and massive increase in remote work environments. And this has raised major issues around just logistics, around operations, around purchasing, around general IT ops, as well as the general productivity vectors of any business. And this is also raising major cybersecurity issues and challenges for businesses across every industry, regardless of its size. And I've touched base on that before. So due to COVID-19, we have seen cloud migration, the rate of which has outpaced security readiness. And 84% of all enterprises are concerned about their overall cloud security, and 92% are worried that their organization is vulnerable to a major cloud misconfiguration related data breach. And this is really important. We've seen, many cases where instances, in a cloud architecture haven't been protected with either, proper credential protection, two-factor authentication and the like. And with the greater number of endpoints, you must have a really sound cybersecurity plan in place that, covers four major things. We talk about prevention, detection, remediation, and response. And those are really the four pillars with any good cybersecurity strategy. So this is a main headline, but the widespread disruption caused by the pandemic did expose massive cybersecurity gaps. Companies just weren't ready for this massive migration in a very short period of time. And today we're going to talk about threat vectors. So this is a focused data point. It's actually quite exact, but I'll say over 1,700. We are seeing just a greater number of COVID-19 themed domain names that are created every single day. So when you look at some of the lures that are out there for unsuspecting visitors of a website where they think maybe they're contributing to COVID-19 relief efforts for first responders, what they may not realize is that when they go to that website and enter their login credentials or their payment information, they're actually giving personal identifiable information and payment credentials to a malicious third party. And we're seeing more and more of this every single day. Cyber criminals are, in fact, leveraging COVID-19 themed malicious campaigns as the main lure to steal financial and confidential information. We've seen a 6x increase in phishing attacks worldwide, both on email and via SMS or text message. So why is it happening? Well, we did touch base on this earlier, but we'll say it again. Businesses were not ready to deploy cybersecurity measures for remote workforces across multiple platforms. Number two, the cyber criminals are in fact using COVID-19 as the main theme for phishing and other malicious attacks. So we'll talk about the challenges now with identity and access management when migrating to hybrid and multi-cloud environments. I'll just touch base on IAM and what it means. So identity access management is really straightforward. And what it means is that we want to make sure that an individual who's accessing any type of database, application, or system is the right person that's accessing at the right time, from the right location, on the right device. So it's really all about controlling and managing access to information and systems, making sure that all of the systems are in fact zero knowledge, zero trust, and have full end-to-end encryption when they're transacting upon information and data. So here's the challenge, and we've enumerated a few of these, but here's the first one, and we're going to talk about authentication. So authentication is not to be confused with encryption, and a lot of people tend to confuse this. And authentication is, does the right person have access to the right system at the right time? And with encryption is, well, okay, is the connection, from A to B or to a system between an individual or other individuals, within a singular system, or is a file at rest and in transit completely encrypted, right? So that nothing is stored in plain text throughout the entire architecture or through the communication process. So multiple authentication processes and logins that are needed between shared service providers and third-party apps, right? And number two, each time a service authenticates a user, the user is typically at risk of their credentials being exposed. So we want to make sure that, again, when you're authenticating into a system, you want to make sure that the entire environment is protected with zero knowledge security. And what that means is that the end user, i.e. the customer, is always under the domain and control of any master passwords or the encryption keys that are being used to encrypt or decrypt their information. All of that information and that architecture must remain client side and not happen on the vendor servers. Next, challenge number two is single sign-on. So we all know that SSO enables end users to use one set of login credentials on compliant websites or cloud-based applications. Traditionally, they use what's called standard assertion markup language, or SAML 2.0 as it's called. We've seen a lack of support for SSO across multiple apps and platforms because SSO is not a silver bullet in the enterprise or even in the mid-sized businesses. It's really important to make sure that all of your security and functionality gaps are covered. Number two, we believe that SSO should always be implemented in conjunction with two-factor authentication, role-based access controls, and provisioning through active password, enterprise password management, and an active tracking system within an enterprise password management capability. We call that advanced reporting and alerts, which is an event logging system that tracks everything that the user is doing within every single application and how they're transacting with all of the passwords, login credentials through the entire identity environment. And that's really important. So what is the solution? Well, I will tell you that the solution is never a silver bullet. It involves a multitude of technologies and, more importantly, a way of thinking and planning that, again, covers the four elements of that cybersecurity strategy that I mentioned earlier, which is prevention, detection, remediation, and response. But at the core of supporting any hybrid or multi-cloud environment is the need for strong identity and access management platform. It is absolutely critical. And I would tell you that 80% of the time, whenever there's a breach, any type of data breach, and you can just look out there and see all the different news stories. Every time there's a data breach, 8 out of 10 times, it's a result of weak password security issues. Identity and access management is the absolute best way to combat and solve that issue. So next, how will we overcome IAM challenges in hybrid and multi-cloud environments? Well, Number one, there's a solution for authentication, and we call it zero-knowledge security architecture. Zero knowledge minimizes the need to transmit confidential information across multiple platforms. In fact, in a zero-knowledge architecture, all information is only accessible by the end user, and all encryption and decryption occurs at the client device level. So, for example, if we have an encryption product, okay, it's really important that you make sure that the encryption keys are generated on the fly, on the client device, and not on the vendor's servers. You do never want a situation where the vendor could potentially be eavesdropping on you or have access to information stored in your applications. That information should always reside with the client, i.e. the customer, and not with the vendor. Okay, next, the solution for single sign-on. We call this Enterprise Password Management, or EPM. EPM is really important when coupled with SSO because it becomes a wonderful and robust, elegant solution to solving federated access and identity throughout an organization. When you pair those two together and they harmoniously integrate, it enables organizations to have complete control over every single password in their business, not just everything that's in a SAML architecture for single sign-on with the compliant applications that are SAML enabled, but also all of the non-SAML compliant applications, metadata, as well as files. So enterprise password management, when done right, can be this unified platform that integrates with any type of identity solution, any type of hybrid cloud or multi-cloud environment. And it also allows you, aside from just authentication, you now integrate full end-to-end encryption into the solution. And this is really important. Now you have single sign-on for authentication, as well as the power of the EPM to bolster and close any of those functional and security gaps to give you full end-to-end encryption as well. So keeping user identities secured and monitored through robust identity and access management is the foundation of cloud security. You cannot have cloud security without having strong identity and access management technology within that architecture. It just will not work. So anyway, thank you very much for attending today. For more information, feel free to go to keepersecurity.com. And it was fantastic talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you everyone for listening. I hope you all enjoyed that. As Darren mentioned, this will be emailed out to you after the webinar, but we're wondering if you have any questions. And I know that, Darren, maybe you can answer. One of the questions that we always get from customers is, so how do they switch to zero knowledge? What's an easy way, easy starting point? Can you dive a little bit into that?
Sure. I think the first thing it's really important is you have to conduct an assessment of all of the vendors and technologies that you're utilizing to protect, safeguard, and transmit information on both the company as well as all of its employees and other stakeholders. I think that's the first step. And I would say that, the best way to do that, it's comprehensive and it can get, slightly expensive, would be, through a SOC audit. I think a SOC assessment, a type 1 and type 2, SOC 2 assessment is really important because it will measure all of the security, confidentiality, and safeguards around your internal architecture, all of your internal controls, as well as the systems that you have in place. And it really forces you to do a robust self-assessment of your entire system. And once you do that, then it becomes much easier, to figure out, okay, which vendors are utilizing zero knowledge architecture, which processes, require it, which ones, are more or less in the safe zone, which ones are not. And then you can start to, determine, okay, which technology should we be utilizing to obtain full zero knowledge in the critical aspects of our architecture and our business. Okay, I see another question here. How does it handle web page form-based authentication when SAML is not available? So I see this question from Sue. For example, a great enterprise password management solution, I'm not here to sell Keeper, but just for instance, to talk about how our product works, we integrate, directly in every major browser out there, i.e. Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Edge, etc. And this system, will authenticate you into any type of web-based application, whether or not it's SAML enabled. And this is really the power behind it. We also have an application that allows you to authenticate seamlessly through zero knowledge into native applications as well. So if you're running something natively or locally on any type of VPC or server, this system will allow you to authenticate with these.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And if we don't have any other questions, we will now finalize the webinar, and we will be emailing you a copy of this. Thank you for joining, and thank you, Darren, for an excellent presentation.
All right, you're welcome, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.